Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir, daf Memchet. Today's daf is sponsored by Gabrielle and Daniel Altman in memory of the 18th year side of our treasured mother, Honorable Miriam J. Altman, Zechronah Lebracha, loved and missed forever, and still our North Star. We're going to get started with where we were up to. We started with this Mishnah comparing a kohen gadol and a Nazir who are walking on a path. Which one, right? Which one is the one who's supposed to be mitameh if there's a mitzvah? Then the Gemara said at the very end of the daf, which was this whole thing is only if we have a kohen gadol and a Nazir together, and then we have to choose which one. However, what if they're each separate? Okay, we have a kohen gadol, we have a Nazir, and they have nothing to do with each other. So this is just the basic law, by the way. It sounded more like what if they're both walking separately, but it's not. It's what if we just have a Nazir, or what if we have a kohen gadol? Obviously, they're mitameh to make mitzvah, to which the Gemara says, where do you get this from? If it's so obvious to you that a regular Nazir or a regular kohen gadol, even though he can't become tameh to anybody else, but he does become a tameh to someone who has no one else to bury them, where is this halakha derived from? And that gets us off on our entire daf and where we're going. So the first thing we're going to do is learn it from, first thing we did on yesterday's daf is learn it by the pasuk of the kohen. The first thing I want to do is redo these psukim because I want you to see the differences because we're going to darshan kind of every word in each of these psukim. So by the kohen gadol, it says, Al kol nafshot met lo yavo, basically means you cannot become impure to anyone. And then it says, just in case it wasn't clear, right? The simple reading is, La'aviv u'limo lo yitama, even to your mother and father. But really, it's not going to be necessary to say even to your mother and father. And that's where the Gemara went off and said, oh, we already know, obviously, if kol nefashot, that includes anyone. And therefore, La'aviv u'limo must be coming to teach you something additional. What is it? Well, La'aviv is going to teach you to your father, not a mitzvah. Limo, we're going to start with exactly today. What does that teach you? That's the pasuk by the kohen gadol. In fact, you know what? Let's finish with that, and then we'll move to the pasukim by the Nazir. So that's where we ended yesterday. La'aviv u'deino mitameh ha'mitamehu l'meit mitzvah. Li'imo, what is that word needed for? Because once you have La'aviv teaching you meit mitzvah, you don't need li'imo also. So that must be coming to teach you something additional. Well, it's needed for some other halacha. Gezeira shava derive. It's to teach you this gezeira shava that we're going to show right now, because imo is also going to appear by the pasuk in Nazir. And if you can show, gezeira shava doesn't always only work if you need the pasuk to be the word to be unnecessary in the verse, but it actually makes it a much stronger gezeira shava, because if you remember, you can knock out a gezeira shava if the word is being used for something else and you have a question on it and say something doesn't make sense, you can knock it out. But if the word is free, then you can't knock it out. So this is going to basically strengthen this gezeira shava, because this word is unnecessary. It must be coming for this gezeira shava. Gezeira shava is when two words appear in the same place. The same word, appears in two different places. We can learn from one to the other. So now we're going to learn from Nazir to kohen gadol. What halacha? You'll see in a minute. The time. Rabbi Yishmael, that's why it says derive, means to what Rabbi learned. That's what we're going to say it goes for this drashot of Rabbi. Rabbi said, Gabe Nazir, bimotam eino mitameh, aval mitameh u'linigam l'zivatam. The pasuk by the Nazir says, okay, something that didn't appear. Now we'll read the pasukim by Nazir. Al kol nafshot met lo yavo. Actually, before that, I want to read you both these pasukim, okay? Kol yemei hiziro laHashem al nefesh met lo yavo. Okay, the first thing it says is, all the days you're a Nazir, al nefesh met lo yavo. You cannot become impure to a dead body. And then it says, La'aviv u'li'imo, like in the Kohen pasuk, right? And there's the gezeira shava of the imo. La'achiv u'la'achoto, notice there's added words here, brother and sister, or to his brother, to his sister. Lo yitama lahem, he will not become impure to them. Here comes a big new word, bimotam, when they die. Ki nezer elohav al rosho, because he has this nizirut, this crown of nizirut on his head. Okay, he's got the crown of God on his head. Okay, the nizirut is over him. That means he cannot become impure to them in their death. Now, notice by the Kohen pasuk, it just said lo yitama, didn't say in their death. So what does it mean in their death? In their death means when they die, you can't become impure to a dead body. But if you actually, they're a leper and you touch them, you actually become impure. And that's not a problem. So if your father's a leper, or anyone for that matter is a leper, and you come in contact with them when you're a Nazir, it's not a problem at all. Okay, so you asked where these psukim are. These are in Bamidbar, chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. Okay. Anytime you want to know psukim about the Nazir, they're all in chapter 6 of Bamidbar. Okay. And the one before is Sota, chapter 5. That's going to be next Masechet. So now we have a very simple drasha. By the Nazir, it teaches you avamatameu linigam ulizivatam. Okay, that you can become impure too if they have a nega, if they're leper, or if they're a zav, for example. Also, they carry impurity, they can make you impure, but that's not a problem at all. Pasuk's only talking about death by the Nazir. Therefore, the kohen gadol, which if you want to know what those verses are, they're in chapter 21. Okay, the pasuk we read before, Lavivu limo lo yitama, is verse 11 in that chapter. There we have, right, Ainli ela b'nazir. So b'motam only appears by Nazir. I'm going back to the Gemara now. B'kohen gadol minai, and where do we get kohen gadol? Amarta lo yomal imo b'kohen gadol. What should you say? Well, just don't say, right? Just don't say imo by kohen gadol. If you didn't say imo, shein Talmud lamar, you would have said sharei kavachomer. You would have said the mother could be learned out from a kavachomer. Shein Talmud lamar. This is kind of going backwards. Why is imo unnecessary? Sharei kavachomer. You could say it like this. Ma'im b'makom shekohen hadyot mitameh la'achiv me'aviv. Okay, now we have a bit of a complicated. Before we get to the gezeira shava, we're going to say why imo is totally unnecessary in that verse. Okay, once we know father, why we know mother. If a kohen gadol cannot become impure to his father, it's going to be obvious he can't become impure to his mother. Why? It's a little bit complicated, but not too bad. It's just a few steps here. A kohen hadyot, what does it say by a kohen hadyot? You can't become a tameh to anybody, but you can become impure to your brother, right? Your mother, your father, your brother, your sister who's a virgin, your wife, and your children. Now, what brother are we talking about when it says achiv? There's different kinds of brothers. There's brothers who share the same parents. There's brothers who share the same father, and there's brothers who share the same mother. Well, because it says achim, achiv, and the word achim comes up by Yosef, if you remember. When the brothers go to Joseph, they say, Shnemasar achim anachnu, we're brothers, we're 12 brothers. And brothers there is brothers through the father. We actually use this to teach by Yevamot, if you remember. By Yevamot, we learned that when you say brother, and one of the brothers dies, it's only, Yibum only goes through the father. And anyone only Yevamot remembers that, right? It's one of the basic laws. You only do Yibum with your brother through your father. So likewise, you can only become impure to a dead body if you're a kohen, if it's your brother through your father. That they get from the word lachav. So now they're going to say the following. That's a base. That's a known. Now, a regular kohen can become impure to his brother through his father. And yet, there's an analogy. So kohen hadyot can become impure to his brother through his father. And yet a kohen gadol, what do we learn? La'aviv. He can't become impure. Kohen gadol mitameh la'aviv. He can't become impure to his father. Now, obviously, the father's closer because if the father's son is allowed to become impure to, right, a kohen can become impure to his father's son, and yet a kohen gadol can't become impure to his father. Makom she'ein kohen hadyot mitameh la'achiv me'imo. If a regular kohen can't become impure to someone who's related to him only through his mother, it shows his connection to his mother is less. It's not less strong. It's just not included in this issue, and therefore ein odin she'ein kohen gadol mitameh le'imo. So then you'd say the following. If the Kohen Gadol can't become impure to the father, obviously he can't become impure to his mother, because even a regular Kohen can't become impure to a brother through his mother. Obviously he can become impure to his mother. It's not that he doesn't have a strong relationship, but it weakens something by saying that his relatives through the mother are less, right, are not permitted to him the way his relatives through his father are. And that basically shows that if a Kohen Gadol can't become impure to the father, of course he can't become impure to his mother, so that word is totally unnecessary. That was all to tell us the word imo is unnecessary. If the word is unnecessary, what can we do? Make a gezeira shava, and now we go back to our gezeira shava law, which we kind of figured it out already, which is im zachita me'adin. So if you already proved now that clearly he's not b'tamei to his mother, and therefore you don't need it in the pasuk, it's extra, it's unnecessary. Ma tamud lomar imo b'kohen gadol. So what is this word imo and kohen gadol coming to teach you? Coming to teach you mufneh lahakish v'ledun imenu gezeira shava. This we already knew, which is it's coming to teach you this gezeira shava, which again means the word appears by Nazir, the word appears by kohen gadol. Ne'emar imo b'Nazir, ne'emar imo b'kohen gadol. They appear in both places. Just like by Nazir, the mother, you can't become impure to your mother if she's dead, but you can become impure to her if she's a zava or if she's a leper. So af imo, and any relative for that matter, and any regular person for that matter, right? And Nazir can become impure any other level of impurity. It's just not to dead people because it says it explicitly b'motam. Therefore, af imo amor b'kohen gadol b'motam eno metameh v'metameh l'nigamu l'zivatam. So that was a very long-winded way of getting to some very simple halacha, which is what is the word l'imo by kohen gadol coming to teach you? Since we already darshan la'aviv, la'aviv was our main thing, mitzvah. But since we're already there, we point out l'imo also is coming to teach you something else because we proved it's clearly unnecessary, and that was the whole drashot they have from the kohen Yod, okay? Because he can be mitameh to his brother from his father, not through his mother. So therefore, if the kohen gadol can't be mitameh to his father, obviously he can't be mitameh to his mother, which then comes to say imo is extra. What's it coming to teach you? Just like in Nazir, it says only in their death you can become impure. Likewise, for the kohen gadol, he can only not become impure death. But if he wants to become impure, or if he happens to become impure, leper, any azav, zava, any of those, it's not a problem. Okay. Now, that was all kohen gadol. That's what we learned. Kohen gadol can be tameh to a mitzvah. Eshkechan kohen gadol nazir minalan. So that taught us kohen gadol. But where do we get the halacha about a nazir from? Dear Tanya. Now we're going to quote a braita. Okay, this braita is going to be kind of complicated. We're going to start off with halacha totally not connected. I mean, not 100%, but not our topic. Okay, it's just, it happens to be the beginning of the braita. So let's just start with that and get it out of the way. So now we're in the Nazir. All the days of your nizirut, you can't come in contact with a nefesh mate. Now, notice it doesn't say a human soul. It just says a soul. Now, does an animal have a soul? Good question. Well, it says here, you might have thought maybe even animals are included, which means if there's a dead animal there, a nevela, right? There's tumat nevela also. Maybe a Nazir can't become impure to a dead body of an animal. Well, why would you think this? Because it says maken nefesh behema. Okay, this is a halacha. If you hit the soul of an animal, meaning if you kill an animal, you have to pay damages. So it calls an animal a nefesh. The animal has a soul according to this. So maybe al nefesh mate includes an animal, which basically means tumat nevela. Dead animal will make a Nazir impure. He's forbidden to come in contact with a dead animal. Well, Talmud Lamal, therefore it says, we're going to have two ways. There's going to be a machloka Tanakama Rabbi Yishmael, but they're both going to say that it's a human only, okay, just in different ways. Al nefesh mate lo yavo, okay, to a dead body, one cannot come in contact with. What does it mean, nefesh mate? Nefesh adama katu medaber. Presumably, this means that anytime it says nefesh mate, it always means a human. Okay, so it's true, it says nefesh behema, but not when it comes to an animal. Nefesh mate only, right? It never says nefesh mate when it comes to an animal, right? It's a good question. I see someone's asking me, why would nefesh be life? Maybe, right? Because animal soul, it's not exactly the thing we connect with animals. I think it's really a question how to translate this word nefesh, and that's kind of what the Gemara is struggling with. So now they say this is benefesh adam, nefesh mate only comes up with humans, so therefore it's only human. Rabbi Yishmael omer, enot tzarich, you don't need your drasha. I'll give you a better reason why it's only human. Harei omer lo yavo. It says kol nefashot mate lo yavo. What does it mean? Don't come. Don't come means don't come into an area, into a tent, let's say, for example, where there's a dead body. Now, tumat nevela, a dead animal, does not create tumat in a tent. So there's this concept of lo yavo, that it would be lo tiga or something, don't touch. But this idea of not coming into a space where there's a dead body, that only applies to bodies. So the verb here, lo yavo, is clearly referring to a dead human and not a dead animal. And therefore, they're only talking about bodies or nefashot, souls, that you become impure to them through coming into a space. And that's not the case for nevela, which it's only by touching. So therefore, we've proven, okay, like I said, this has nothing to do with our topic really. It's just darshaning the psukim in order. So this braita started with, as I said, Bamidbar, chapter 6. I actually read the wrong pasuk before. I said, I'll call the pasuk meit lo yavo. Sorry, my mistake. That was the kohen pasuk. I apologize. It's kol yimei ziro Hashem al nefesh meit lo yavo. Okay, that's the Nazir pasuk. So they both say lo yavo. In any case, it's clear here we're talking about humans and not animals. Now we get to the next pasuk. So that was Bamidbar, chapter 6, verse 6. Now we're in verse 7. Very easy. Just like we said, la'aviv, by the kohen gadol comes to teach. La'aviv, you can become impure, but not to a mitzvah. Likewise, now here it's a little different. Rabbi Yishmael says, let's learn it from la'aviv u'li'imo, mother and your father. Okay, we don't know yet why he says both. Okay, why you need both for that. But meaning these people you can't become impure to, but you could become impure to maintenance. Remember, that was our whole question. We learned it by kohen gadol from la'aviv. Where do we learn it by Nazir? Answer is la'aviv u'li'imo. Okay, that comes to teach you mitzvah by a Nazir. But this is not going to be so simple because we're going to start asking a slew of questions. And when we get to the third question, we're actually going to be stuck. Okay, and then we're going to have to reread Rabbi Yishmael. So right now they say, Ad shelo yomal yesh li b'din. But okay, now I'll show you on the sheet. Okay, we're going to go to the chart now, the study guide for today. That's not what I wanted to share. 1 second. Okay. So now we're going to go to the study guide. So we have the braita. We're now in the continuation of the braita because the first part of the braita, as I said, was not the important part for our purposes. We're now going to darshan, as you see from the chart, la'aviv u'li'imo, la'achiv, maybe li'imo separately. Some are going to have la'aviv u'li'imo together, and some are going to have imo as separate, la'choto, and nefashot and mit. Okay, but we're going to see Rabbi Yishmael's approach. We're going to see Rabbi Akiva's approach. This is a bit of a long-winded braita because we're going to kind of break and ask questions and then come back. Okay, so the first version, which you see is crossed out here, because eventually we're going to cross it out, is that Rabbi Yishmael learns la'aviv u'li'imo ino mitameh v'amitameh u'lemeit mitzvah. He's going to learn it from those words. Eventually, we're going to cross that out and say it actually comes for something else. Rabbi Akiva, though, you can already see, is going to learn it from la'aviv u'li'imo ino mitameh v'amitameh u'lemeit mitzvah. He will learn it from that pasuk. Okay, and we're going to have to see the ping pong, what each one does and why they come to different conclusions. So the first question, and now we're going to go under the chart. We're going to start with the questions. So we're going to have 3 questions on his drashot. So I added these important words at the end of each question, which is the first question and the third question are all basically coming to say the drashot is unnecessary because you could have gotten to it by logic. Okay, a drashot is not needed if logic would tell you that anyway. So that's the gist of question 1 and question 3. Question 2 is that maybe the drashot is incorrect and maybe you really need to learn something else from those words. Okay, so that's the gist of where we're going to go right now. So let's read them inside. Ad shelo yomal yesh li b'din. In other words, why are you saying la'aviv u'li'imo comes to exclude mitzvah? Why don't you just say it's by logic? What would be the logic? And now this brings us back to the Mishnah. If you remember, there was this whole debate. Which one, if there's a kohen gadol and a Nazir, which one becomes impure and which one has a higher level of sanctity and a lower level? So this is going to play off that. Both the question is going to go with one logic and the answer is going to take the other side. So you could say very simply, in other words, remember, the obvious is we already, or the default, we already know kohen gadol comes from la'aviv u'li'imo, comes to teach you, la'aviv comes to teach you, mitzvah, right, is you're allowed to become impure to a mitzvah. So once you know that by kohen gadol, you can learn it from kohen gadol to Nazir. Why? Uma kohen gadol shekedushato kedushat olam. The kohen gadol is a much higher level of kedusha because it lasts forever. And yet, mitameh lemeit mitzvah. And yet he's going to become impure to a dead body. So Nazir, she'en kedushato kedushat olam, obviously then a Nazir who doesn't have, his sanctity does not last forever. Ein odin shemitameh lemeit mitzvah. Wouldn't it just be obvious, an obvious kavachomer argument or logical argument? Okay? To which the Gemara says no. And now we know why, because we already saw these 2 sides in the Mishnah. Im amarta b'kohen gadol shekeni no mevi korban al tumato. Tomar b'nazir shemevi korban al tumato. Ho'il mevi korban al tumato lo yitameh lemeit mitzvah. You could say no, the opposite, which is kohen gadol is actually less problematic to become impure to the dead because he doesn't even have to bring a sacrifice when he becomes impure. And a Nazir has to go bring a sacrifice. So because the Nazir brings a sacrifice, maybe you would say Kohen gadol, okay, it's not so severe. He can become impure to a mate mitzvah. But a Nazir, no. Therefore, you need the drashot. That's the conclusion here, the answer to the first question. Talmud lomar, la'aviv u'limo lo yitama, aval mitameh l'meit mitzvah. So from here, you learn very clearly, specifically, it tells you, la'aviv u'limo, but you can be mitameh to meit mitzvah. That was question number one. Question number two. And like I said, maybe even this question is not going to be the drashah is unnecessary. This question is going to be maybe the drashah is wrong. Maybe you should say something else. Oh, eino mitameh la'aviv u'limo, aval yitameh l'shar meitim. Maybe, okay, now this is an interesting logic. Maybe you would say, what's the logic here? Then in Nazir, maybe the Isur of a Nazir is only to become impure, not to become impure to his parents and his closest relatives. But maybe he could become impure to anybody else. Now, what's the logic here? Why would you even suggest this? It seems counterintuitive, which is what the Gemara is going to eventually say. Why is it counterintuitive? Because of the kohen and yod, the regular kohen who is only forbidden to, right? He's forbidden to everyone else. He's permitted to his relatives. But let's put that aside for right now. And let's try to think of the logic of this question. The Gemara is trying to say maybe it's specifically telling you only, like first it says, don't become pure to anyone. What we mean by anyone is not your close relatives. Why your close relatives is more of a problem. Well, first of all, the pasuk says, Ki nezer Elohav al rosho. He has the crown of God on his head. And maybe he's not supposed to be very upset and tormented. Now, when are you the most tormented? When your relatives die. So don't go to the funeral of your relatives. Don't go to the cemetery of your relatives because it's going to, create all these emotions that we don't want you to have as a Nazir or whatever it is. We don't know exactly what it is, right? But we're kind of suggesting. Whereas go to a random person's funeral, go to a random cemetery. How connected do you connect anyway? So maybe it's really a problem. It's just a hava, as we say, it's just a thesis, a theoretical possibility. This isn't the case, but they're suggesting maybe the pasuk is telling you really just for your father and mother and not for other relatives. Okay, specifically what we said, it's like a klal prat kind of thing, right? To everyone, but then it says just the father and mother. So maybe it's just people that are like your father and mother, your close relatives. To which the Gemara answers and says, no. Amarta kal v'chomer. No, you can say a kal v'chomer. Okay, what's the kal v'chomer? Uma kohen hidyot shemitameh lekrovim eino mitameh l'shar meitim. As I said, we're going to learn from a regular kohen. A regular kohen can become impure to his relatives, and yet eino mitameh l'shar meitim. This, by the way, rejects the possibility that maybe Nazir is unique. They're basically saying, no, where do we have a model of someone who can't become impure to dead people? It's a kohen. Can't become impure to anyone else, but he can become impure to his relatives. So Nazir, so wouldn't it be obvious that a Nazir who can't become impure to his relatives, obviously he will not be able to become impure, she will not be able to become impure to any other dead people, in which case, going now to Amud Bet, so what are we learning from this in the end? In other words, the drashah is correct. So again, we took this drashah of Rabbi Yishmael, who said, but not a meit mitzvah. First, we said, maybe it's not necessary, you could learn it by logic. We rejected that. No, you couldn't necessarily learn it logically. Then we said, because the logic could be the opposite. Then we said, maybe this isn't the real drashah. Maybe it should be something else. Maybe it should be telling us that he's mitameh to other people and just not to the father and mother, to which we said that can't possibly be right because of logic. And then we said, okay, so we're back with our drashah. Now, I'm reading the Gemara in a particular way that this is a third question. I'll just point out that there are a little bit of a different ways of reading this last section or this next section. But the way it seems to me simple reading is this is a third question. So now they say, okay, but ad shelo yomal yesh lebedin. Now this is back to the same, notice it has the exact same words. You can see it here on the sheet. Ad shelo yomar yesh lebedin is the same way we started the first question. And that's, don't say it like, this is why I think it's a third question. It's just another, right? Don't say it like that. It's obvious. In other words, you don't need a drashah. It's logical. What would the logic be? Well, again, knowing from kohen gadol, we're going to learn it. Why? Ne'emru klalot bekohen gadol, v'ne'emru klalot benazir. What were our psukim? Remember, it says by the kohen, and that's why I got confused by them because I quoted the wrong one time because they basically say the same thing. Al kol nafshot meit lo yavo. Right. This is by the kohen gadol. You can't become pure to any dead bodies. That's a klal. That's a general. And by the nazir, it says al nefesh meit lo yavo. Right. You can't come on any dead body. That's basically two generalizations, one in Nazir, one in kohen gadol. So you would say the following. So when it said don't become impure to anybody by kohen gadol, what did it mean? Even your father and mother. Well, right, mitzvah, but, right, not your father and mother, but yes to a mate mitzvah. So even though it says don't become impure to anybody, it excluded a mate mitzvah. So af klalot hamuot b'nazir, logic would just state, since it also said don't become impure to anyone, and then started saying your father and mother, right? It would be obvious that it's all the same. Which means you don't need the drashot, because it's the exact same structure as kohen gadol. Once we prove it by kohen gadol, we don't need any sort of proof in our case. So that's question number 3. To answer question number 3, the Gemara now says the following. No, I could, if you want to say this general pasuk is where you're learning it all from, since there's a general pasuk by kohen gadol and there's a general pasuk by Nazir, guess what? There's a general pasuk by a regular kohen also. And a regular kohen can become impure to their relatives. So they say the following. So this is rejecting, this is giving an answer to that question. Don't question, you could have proven it by logic. And therefore, why'd you bring this drashot? Lavivu li'imo comes to teach you, but yes, made mitzvah. You could have learned it logically from kohen gadol. To which they say no, because you could have done logic. Logic would have told you something else. You could have done it in this way. Just like by kohen idiot, it says l'nefesh lo yitama. Don't become impure to anybody, right? And then what does it say after? But you can become impure to your brother, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, blah, blah, blah. So you might have said, Ma klalot hamuot b'kohen idiot mitamei la'aviv, af klalot hamuot b'nazir mitamei la'aviv. Talmud lamal, la'aviv ulimo lo yitama, halamet mitzvah mitama. So they say the following. What is this la'aviv ulimo pasuk coming to teach you? Now, since logic would state that you could learn it from kohen idiot, and logic would state you could learn it from kohen gadol, right? And we're not sure which one, so they want you to know. La'aviv ulimo lo yitame, number 1, right? You can't become impure to your father and mother, but who can you become impure to? A mate mitzvah. And then you need the drashot. Okay? So they basically say you obviously need this drashot. Why? In simpler language, you need the drashot because theoretically, you could have learned this drashot you could have learned logic, and as logic, you could learn logic from kohen gadol. Logic, you could learn logic from kohen idiot. You would come to opposite conclusions about your father and mother. That's why the verse needed to tell you your father and mother, but not a mate mitzvah. And that's why you need the drashot. This doesn't really make so much sense, which is what the Gemara is going to say in a second, because then the Gemara says, what do you mean? According to what you just said, since you theoretically could learn from a kohen idiot, Laviv Limo is not free for this drashah to teach you 2 things. Number 1, you can't become impure to your father and mother. Number 2, but you can to a mate mitzvah, because it's needed for the simple reading of you cannot become impure to your father. In case you might have thought, if you just say, oh, nefesh mate lo yavo, you might have thought it's exactly like a kohen idiot. You can't become impure to anyone, but you can to your relatives, which means now, okay, let's go back to that chart. Okay, in the beginning of the chart, second. Now, what did we see on the chart? Rabbi Yishmael tried to learn from Laviv Limo that yes, mate mitzvah. In the end, they change it to say, no, she'ein mitamei Laviv Limo. Okay, so now they say, sorry, I lost my place, right? Ela la'aviv lomal she'ein mitamei la'aviv. Okay, right now he says, and here the chart is the weakness of the chart. You can't show 2 things at once. This word li'imo shouldn't be here for Rabbi Yishmael. It is needed for Rabbi Akiva. That's why it's still here. But from the word la'aviv, according to Rabbi Yishmael, now they change it to say, what you learn from la'aviv is that you can't become impure to your father. Meaning, you might have thought we learned from kohen idiot. This is needed for the very basic halacha that you can't become impure to your father if you're a Nazir. Okay? Because it wasn't obvious otherwise. Because you might have thought you could learn from kohen gadol, but you could also learn from kohen idiot, because both have these general psukim. So therefore, we change Rabbi Yishmael. That's why we call it the second girsa. Now, where are we going to learn mate mitzvah from? So now going down this chart, we now continue. We're now going to learn le'achiv, because remember the pasuk with the Nazir. What did it say? La'aviv ulimo, la'achiv ula'achato. We have 4 words here. We're going to darshan each of them. La'aviv, number 1, can't become impure to your relatives, which wasn't so obvious before. We needed a drashot. Lachiv eno mitameh halamet mitzvah mitameh. Lachiv comes to teach you the mate mitzvah halacha. Don't become impure to your brother, but you can to a mate mitzvah, because once we have father, obviously not brother, so brothers are necessary. From there we learn mate mitzvah. Okay, so that's where he's going to learn. Next, what do we learn from Le'imo? Gezeira shava derive. We already learned that, right? He's going to take Le'imo and say, oh, gezeira shava, just like by Nazir. It's only in death and not if they're a zav or a leper. Likewise, by kohen gadol, only if they're a zav, only if they're dead and not if they're a leper or a zav. Le'achoto, for another drashot. Lechiditanya, okay, for as appears in this braita, ditanya, as it appears in a braita. Le'achoto matamulomar, what do you need this le'achoto for? Okay, what's unique about Korban Pesach and Brit Milah? That both of them, if you don't do them, you get karet. There's a bit of a main difference, which is if you don't do Pesach, you get karet immediately. If you don't do Brit Milah, it's actually only the child when he grows up. If he doesn't have a Brit Milah and you didn't take care of it, he gets karet. But still, it's a mitzvah daseh with karet upon it. So that makes it very serious. Right? They're the only two positive commandments. If you don't fulfill them, usually you don't get punished if you don't do a positive commandment. But they're the only two that actually have a punishment of karet associated with it, which is quite serious. So you're on the way to do this mitzvah. Now here, you're not a Nazir, you're not a kohen gadol, you're just a random person. You're going to do a mitzvah. And then all of a sudden, someone tells you your relative died. What are you supposed to do? You're in a quandary. Do you go to continue doing your mitzvah that if you don't do it, you're going to get karet for? Or, maybe not immediately, but, eventually there will be karet associated with it. You're supposed to do Brit Milah on time, right? People are very careful about doing it on the day of. And if you now go deal with your burying your body, number one, you won't be able to do the Korban Pesach because you'll be impure. Number two, you're going to end up having to skip the Brit Milah on the day you're supposed to do it because you won't have time to do both. So Yachol Yitama, you might think, okay, well, my relative is waiting for me. I'm going to go become impure. Marta lo Yitama. When it says Lachoto lo Yitama, it's coming to teach you this halacha. Number one, you don't become impure in this case, okay, because they're so serious. However, you learn something additional though. Yachol lo Yitama lemeit mitzvah. You might have thought, what if it's not your relative, or it's your relative, but you're the only one that's there to bury your relative? Or it's some random person and there's nobody at all to bury them. You might have thought you could say, oh, listen, sorry, but I'm on my way to do the Korban Pesach. I can't. No. Meit mitzvah supersedes everything. So again, this is very out of context. But they're taking this word la'achoto to teach you another time when meit mitzvah overrides. Since we're already, la'achim comes to teach you meit mitzvah when you're a Nazir. This comes to teach you meit mitzvah when you're on your way to do the Korban Pesach or to do a Brit Milah for your son. Some people, by the way, to deal with the problem that you don't get karet right away, some people say you're on the way to do both of those things. And that's what the Brit Milah comes in. Anyway, this question's asked, but again, I think it's really just because it's so serious and so important to do on time, even if you're not going to immediately get karet. The point is that this is coming to teach you meit mitzvah supersedes those mitzvot as well. That's what lachoto is coming for. Now, that's all the drashot of Rabbi Yishmael. So just to review, Rabbi Yishmael, we started with this because all we wanted to know was where do you get meit mitzvah by a Nazir? But we got into all sorts of other things as well. In the end, Rabbi Yishmael, because of the question we asked that we didn't have an answer for, we said in the end, right, this problem of learning from klalot, you could learn it from the generalities by kohen gadol, you could also learn it from the generalities of kohen adyo, which basically causes us to say the word la'aviv must really come to teach you that you can't become a tamei to your father, which means we have to use a different word to learn meit mitzvah. We learn it from le'achav, to your brother, la'achiv. Then to your mother comes to teach you this gezeira shava, that only in their death, but not in their life, and not if they're a leper or a zav or something like that. And we learn from there to the kohen gadol. And la'achoto is to teach you this halacha. By the way, you can see from the chart, this is the only one that both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael agree on. Okay, in a minute, we're going to see why Rabbi Akiva starts already disagreeing with Rabbi Yishmael and has to do, each one is coming for something else. So la'achoto comes to teach you that meit mitzvah is so important that it even overrides someone going on their way to do a Korban Pesach or a Brit Milah for his son. Now, Rabbi Akiva Omer. Okay, next drasha. Now we want to know Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva, remember that according to Rabbi Yishmael, we needed la'aviv to teach you that you can't become impure to your relatives because we might have learned it from a regular kohen. Comes Rabbi Akiva and immediately disagrees with him. He says, Nifashot, if you notice that pasuk we read, it was the one before, pasuk Vav said, Al Al nefesh meit lo yavo. So he says this should be nefesh, not nefashot. It's a mistake. The Aleph sends you to the Bach who corrects it, because nefashot is what appears in the Kohen Gadol pasuk, which shows, by the way, I wasn't the only one who got confused between these pasukim, because they're so similar. Anyway, nefesh comes to teach you elu harichokim. Al nefesh meit lo yavo. So comes, they say, why didn't you just say al meit lo yavo? Nefesh, Rabbi Akiva says, comes to teach you people who are not related to you. Mate comes to bring something additional. So what does it come? Your relatives, hakrovim, elu hakrovim. So now we already get relatives that you can't become pure to your relatives. So don't think you can learn it from the kohen idiot, like Rabbi Yishmael said, because the word mate already got rid of the relatives. Once the word mate got rid of the relatives, the words la'aviv u'li'imo are free. La'aviv u'li'imo, mitzvah. So just like we learned from la'aviv when it came to the kohen gadol, we also learned from aviv here. We're going to have to explain why la'aviv u'li'imo, why both those words are necessary. Why don't you just learn it from la'aviv like we did by the kohen gadol? We'll deal with that tomorrow. So right now he says, we're going to learn it from that pasuk. La'achiv, so then la'achiv, obviously he can't say la'achiv is to teach you made mitzvah. We already learned that from la'aviv u'li'imo. La'achiv she'im haya kohen gadol v'hu nazir. La'achiv eno matameh, ava matameh u'le'meit mitzvah. It is coming from made mitzvah, but what case? Let's say you're both a kohen gadol and you're a nazir. It's the whole question. How could you be both? A kohen gadol has to grow his hair, the nazir has to cut his hair. Anyway, answer is given. There's ways to do it because Kohen Gadol has 30 days. He can't leave it for longer than 30 days. So you could kind of do your nizirut in those 30 days. There's all sorts of answers to that question. Anyway, assuming you could be a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, let's say you're both. Then you might have thought, well, you've got two things going for you, right? If you become impure to a mitzvah, you're both a Kohen Gadol and you're a Nazir. That's two negative prohibitions of being mitameh meit. Maybe that's a higher level, and maybe you wouldn't be mitameh meit mitzvah. La'achiv comes to tell you no. If you're kohen gadol and nazir, you can't become impure to your brother or any relatives, but you can become impure to meit mitzvah. So it's like another level. Okay. Next, la'achoto, because we have to go through the list of what Rabbi Akiva is doing. Titania. Oh, this is where I told you before. Here we have no reason that he needs to differ from Rabbi Yishmael. He's going to have the exact same drashot. Okay, he has the exact same drashot. That mitzvah is also supersedes someone going on their way to do it Pesach or Brit Milah. Now we say, but wait, if he learned from La'aviv u'li'imo the made mitzvah, li'imo is not free for this gezeira shava Rebbe that teaches you that you can become impure if you're a kohen gadol, even to if they're a zav, a leper, all that. So Amar L'cha, he could answer you, and this is why I didn't change it in the chart, because in the braita he really says La'aviv u'li'imo eno matameh ava matameh u'le'meit mitzvah, but now he says the following: Kevan Amar Mar, since Rabbi Akiva himself said, Imaya kohen gadol v'nazir la'achiv eno matameh ava matameh u'le'meit mitzvah, mali kohen gadol l'chude, mali nazir v'kohen gadol. What he's really saying here is the following. Since he says, now he's actually moving, it's actually, I shouldn't say, I'll erase what I just said before about La'aviv u'li'imo. This stands. Now he's switching to the Kohen Gadol. And he says, when the Kohen Gadol, if you have a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, right? What did we just learn? You can be mitameh l'meit mitzvah. So from here, the word by Kohen Gadol li'imo is totally unnecessary. Why is it unnecessary? Because if you wanted to teach, right, mitameh u'le'meit mitzvah, even the la'aviv is really unnecessary. Because in maya kohen gadol v'nazir la'achiv eno mitameh ava mitameh u'le'meit mitzvah, mali kohen gadol l'chude, mali nazir v'kohen gadol. So where is Rebbe going to get his gezeira shava from? He's going to get it from the Kohen pasuk. The rules of gezeira shava are as long as one of the words is unnecessary. And he's basically saying in the Kohen gadol pasuk, you don't really need la'aviv to teach you mitameh u'le'meit mitzvah, because from la'achiv by nazir, what do you learn? A Kohen Gadol and a Nazir can be mitameh to his brother, but right, can't be mitameh to his brother, but can be to a meit mitzvah. So obviously, if you only have one of them, if you're just a Kohen Gadol, you would need a pasuk to teach you that you can be mitameh to a meit mitzvah. So we're going to learn it. That really is somewhat unnecessary. The drashot we saw on yesterday's daf, that Aviv comes to teach you that. Well, Aviv is now unnecessary, and we can learn the gezeira shava to our situation. Rabbi Yishmael. Now we have another question on Rabbi Yishmael. Kohen Gadol v'hu Nazir minale. Well, right, we're doing the ping pong. If Rabbi Akiva learns a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir from the word la'achiv, and Rabbi Yishmael just learns a regular meit mitzvah and not someone who's both a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol, so where does Rabbi Yishmael learn? What if you're a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol? Maybe you couldn't be mitameh to a meit mitzvah because you've got Two things going for you. Well, he says the following. No, you don't need a drashot for that. Once made mitzvah overrides one negative commandment, like let's say Nazir, or it overrides kohen gadol, what's the difference if it's one or two? It's the same. Obviously, made mitzvah overrides. Lachiv comes to teach you, made mitzvah overrides, whether it's one prohibition or whether it's two prohibitions, whether you're both a Nazir and a kohen gadol, or you're individually a kohen gadol, you're individually a Nazir, it doesn't make a difference. You could be a Nazir and a kohen gadol, you could be a Nazir, there's no special need for another pasuk. Achoto lamali. So now he says the following, okay. Tosfot says this question is according to Rabbi Yishmael, because if Rabbi Yishmael says that once you have made mitzvah overrides a negative commandment, right, from lachiv, and it overrides two negative commandments even, then you don't need a special drashot lachoto to say that made mitzvah overrides Pesach and Brit Milah. Because if it overrides Nazir and Kohen Gadol, obviously from that one word lachiv, and obviously Nazir by itself, it should obviously then override Pesach and Brit Milah. So why do you need another drashot for that? To which the Gemara answers, our last answer for today, Sal kadat achamina kishara rachmana lemeit mitzvah Nazir v'kohen to isurei lavi hehu aval milah Pesach tikare lo yitama lemeit mitzvah kamashmama. Not so simple, because again, the meit mitzvah, the Pesach and Brit Milah are much more severe, right? Two isurei lavi are not equal to one isur karet. Isur karet is much more severe. So therefore, you need a special drashot to teach you also lachoto, which comes to tell you, you can be a meit mitzvah override someone who's on their way to do a Pesach or a Brit Milah, you still would be mitamed a meit mitzvah and not fulfill those other mitzvah. Okay, that you learn from achoto. You couldn't learn from the others because two negative commandments is not the same as one karet isur. Karet is on a way higher level, and you might have thought meit mitzvah doesn't override. So let's do, I know our daf was a little bit confusing, but in the end, it's really not, if you organize it, it's not so confusing. We start with Kohen Gadol. Let's just go back from the end of yesterday's stuff. We're going to go through the study guide here, and you can see the whole daf at a glance. We had this drashah la'aviv, which came to say aviv, but right, you can't, but yes, meit mitzvah. That was our main drashah for Kohen Gadol. Li'imo, what was that? That's for this gezeira shava about the leper and the zav. Then we wanted to get to what about a Nazir? How do we know a Nazir can be mitamed meit mitzvah? First, we brought this side issue, which didn't have to do with our topic, about al nefesh meit lo yavo. Does that include also nevela, dead animals? We said no. Each one brought from different reasons, okay, and different elements from the pasuk. Then the braita continued with, which is why we brought it in the first place, with the drashah. We started with the Rabbi Yishmael darshans, laviv limo eno mitameh, right? From laviv limo, he learned, but yes, meit mitzvah. To which the Gemara asked 3 questions on it. 2 were the drashah is unnecessary. 1 was the drashah maybe should be something else. In the end, we answered the questions why it wasn't unnecessary and why we don't say in that, right, the drashah you tried to say in the second question. When we had the third one, though, we were able to reject the difficulty and say, sorry, I'm just trying to get down. We were able to reject the difficulty and say that really there's a different way to read it, and you could have learned the klalot from the kohen idiot, and therefore it is necessary. However, they said, no, you don't even have that free for a drashah, because if you could possibly learn it from kohen idiot, then you need la'aviv to teach you. You can't be matamed to your father. So therefore, we reject that answer, and we go back to the braita, and the braita basically says, number 1, la'aviv and imo, la'aviv comes to teach you, you can't be matamed to your father. Okay, just so you don't think maybe a Nazir is like a kohen idiot. Then la'achiv came to teach you the meit mitzvah halakha, le'imo came to teach you the gezeira shava of Rebbe, la'achoto came to teach you meit mitzvah overrides even someone on the way to do the Pesach and the Brit Milah. Then we brought Rabbi Akiva's drashah, who already learned relatives from meit, which means he didn't learn it from Aviv. Aviv is now free to teach meit mitzvah. Brother then teaches you something else, and that's the Kohen Gadol, and he's a Nazir. The braita of achoto he kept. Then we questioned, where does he learn Rebbe from? And he basically learned it from the Kohen Gadol pasuk and not from our pasuk at all. And then we had the question of Rabbi Yishmael, which is, why does he even, right, number 1, what does he do about a Kohen Gadol and Nazir? Once we explain that, then we really don't even have a need for this drashah lachoto, because it obviously made mitzvah overrides 2 mitzvot. Lo taseh, it should override that as well. No, because that's karet, and that's not the same as 2 isurei lavim, 2 negative commandments. And with that, that's where we got up to. We're going to continue with this a little bit more into tomorrow, which is why do we need also aviv and imo together? So we're going to get to that as well. Okay, that's it for today. Hope the sheet will help you organize. Even if your Hebrew's not great, you could still try to use it in terms of the structure to help you organize where the stuff went. That's it for today. Wishing everyone a Shavua Tov.